Welcome to Phails. My name is Philip Jones, and today my guest is Craig Tennant. He's a certified shadow work facilitator, coach, and organizational consultant. Wave to everybody, Craig.
Good to see you all.
Yeah, today Phil fails at shadow work.
How exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
I've always been like a fan of Carl Jung,
Uh-huh.
the mystic,
Yeah.
right? And there's like in my mind, there's a binary between Carl Jung on one side, this spiritual dude,
Uh-huh.
and like Freud on the other side, like a more science-y or I don't know how you would call it, but why do I think of those two together?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really, I'm not a fan per se of Carl Jung. I studied psychology in college for a bit, and I know about him more because he's connected to shadow work, and I got excited about shadow work and know that Carl Jung's, coined the term shadow back in the day, and but I don't really know that much about him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you get into shadow work?
Well, I was involved in the Mankind Project. I had done the New Warrior Training Adventure Weekend that I know you're familiar with.
Yeah.
And a guy that was a leader in the Mankind Project was offering to a shadow work weekend. And this was in 2013. They were running it in Dallas, he and his wife. And somebody that I knew said, you should come and try this out. And I had been involved in the Mankind Project for about 3 years at that time. And so I said, sure, I'll go. And my partner and I went and attended that weekend. And I was facilitated by this couple through a process. And I was just blown away. And not only was I able to connect and clear up some stuff inside of myself that really needed to be cleared up, but I was just so blown away by the quality and sharpness of their facilitation. It was like a scalpel that they used in the way that they were using language to help me see things that I wasn't able to see. And I was just so excited about it. I was like, that was the coolest thing ever. And then about 5 or 6 months later, somebody said they're running a basic facilitator training for shadow work in Dallas. And I was like, I'm going to that. I need to go and learn how to do some of that because I just was so impressed with it. So my partner and I went and attended that basic facilitator training, and I was hooked.
You're hooked.
I was hooked.
How long ago was that?
That was in 2014. So I did the weekend in August of 2013 as an attendee. And then we did that basic facilitator training in March of 2014. Yeah. It was a difficult week, actually, because my stepbrother died suddenly of a heart attack on Wednesday, March 19th. And 3 days later, I was scheduled to attend that training, and I went to the training. And it turned out to be the best thing I could have done because I was really supported at a time where it was important to have good support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And then the week afterwards, I went back to Boston, which is where I'm from, to attend to that situation.
Right.
Yeah.
What was your background prior to shadow work facilitation?
I was a software services consultant.
Okay.
And I had gotten into software when I was 25 years old back in 1989. I had worked for a couple of different software companies. And then after that, I moved into consulting. Software services consulting. And so at that time in 2013, I was a shareholder in a small boutique software services company based in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And I was traveling around the country leading teams of developers implementing software for Fortune 2000 companies. So big companies.
Yeah.
And implementing software.
Wow.
And getting bored with it already by that point. Yeah. Actually had been in a spot much earlier where I was like, how do I get out of this and do something that feels more, especially since I had been doing my personal development work. Anyway, before the Mankind Project, I was involved in another training called Pathways Core Training that was created by Dr. Phil McGraw from the Dr. Phil Show.
Oh, okay. I didn't know he had something like that.
It's co-gender training that took place in Dallas, and it was an intensive training. And I was exposed to that at 38 years old back in 2001. And that was when I first kind of got connected to this idea of, wait a minute, I can learn about myself. Oh, I have emotions and I can feel them. Because I remember zipping up my emotions like around 12 or 13 years old because it was not okay to cry.
Yeah.
And then at 38, it was like I had a full sob for the first time since I was 12 or 13 years of age because of that work. And that's what hooked me I started to feel myself again. I started to get into my body.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm
Tapping into
diverging
emotions.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds beautiful.
So that was the first. For shadow work itself, I had already been involved in doing personal development work. I was working as a software services consultant, which used my brain a lot. Really required me to work with people and lead people and lead my teams and client teams and to facilitate. But to facilitate, how do we develop the solution that's right for them? But then I saw this opportunity to learn how to facilitate helping people get what they wanted, what they really wanted. And that's what hooked me there.
Yeah. There's a lot of success throughout your life.
Interestingly, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was successful. I've been successful. Yeah.
I mean, getting into software at that age, I mean, software's just gotten more and more prevalent in our culture, our society, and has been more and more important for business.
No question.
So investing in that at a young age was probably I don't know that it was smart, but it was definitely fortunate.
Yeah, it was an that journey. And you may ask me about this later on, but I was in the restaurant business at a young age, at 15.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was 22 and got to be a manager, assistant manager of a fine dining restaurant that I realized that's a dead end for me. Because I saw people who were 50 years old waiting tables and miserable.
Yeah.
And management in the restaurant business is not any better than that. So I decided to go to college late, like at 21. And I was in college and I said, I need to get some experience in software. So I went to the counselor and said, can you help me get into a company somewhere? And I talked myself into an entry-level job, and the rest is history around that. So software services has been very good to me.
Yeah.
I'm not complaining, but right around that time that I came into shadow work and I started to learn about shadow work was the time where I was like, how do I get out of this? Because it's not interesting to me, the software side.
Yeah. We've got a lot in common. I worked in restaurants through college. And when I was 15, I had a job as a dishwasher at a country club. And when I finished my career in restaurant, I'd done pretty much everything there was to do in restaurant, but I was a business manager for a fine dining restaurant. And I just thought, man, this isn't for me. The culture, not to say anything wrong or bad about folks that work in the service industry, but there was a culture, there was a lot of drug and alcohol use. There was a lot of, I think companies working folks kind of past their comfort zone, getting as many hours out of them as they could.
A lot of doubles.
Beyond the contracted, hourly thing. And it wasn't until I had my kiddos and got a divorce that I started really getting into software. But then I was in software for 10 years, worked my way up and taught myself from just getting any job I could get at a software company and losing them and getting a better one and then losing it and then getting a better one. But I often joke around that I failed my way to a pretty high position as a senior software engineer at Cisco was my last role.
Very familiar with them.
And it was really good to me.
Yeah.
But there's a big but. It wasn't feeding my soul. It wasn't feeding. I don't think it created a human being that could connect with my daughters and model for them what I wanted to model for them and model for other people. And they led to kind of mental health breakdowns. I had multiple ones where I'd be on short-term disability for like long periods, where I was navigating kind of the fallout from those roles. Not only the roles, things that were going on in my life too, but it just seemed like they weren't a steady leg in my life, a foundational pillar.
It seemed for me that there was always the energy of chasing the dollar in that world, because that's what everybody around me was doing.
Yeah.
So I was in a space, and for a while I was good at that. I chased the dollar and did a good job.
Yeah.
And so that there was a satisfaction of that aspect of it. Like, it was nice to make a lot of money. And it did not take long for it to become an empty chase. And I suspect you had this, that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to have...
So we're brethren.
We're brethren. Yeah, for sure. It's interesting how closely restaurant, software, and then now a serious journey.
Did you ever complete a bachelor's degree in college?
I did. Yeah. I got it in radio, television, and film, which is... I returned to
now what you're doing,
that passion and that love of radio, television, and film here with this project.
Yeah. I ended up not completing my bachelor's program because I got that job after about 3 years of study as a software telephone tech support guy back in '89. And pretty quickly realized that I was learning way more in my job than I was learning at school.
Yeah.
And school was technologically 3 or 4 years behind.
Yep.
And so I made a conscious choice to take a semester off. And when I did, I just never went back.
Yeah.
And I made a really good living for a long time.
Yeah.
Without that bachelor's degree.
All right. We're going to do Phil Phails' 5 questions on shadow work, our topic for today. And the first one's kind of pretty common. I ask, how does someone fail at shadow work?
Interesting question. I'm not sure what that really means. How does somebody fail at shadow work?
I could think of, if I could reframe it for you, what are the pitfalls along the way of shadow work? Because fail is synonymous, at least with the context of this show, with learning.
Gotcha.
What are the kind of like stumbles or the challenges with regard to shadow work for somebody?
Well, I mean, I think one thing is that if I think shadow work is a magic pill and that it's going to change everything overnight, then I'm not going to get the results that I'm looking for. I have to recognize that the complex shadows that are driving my life, the things that I'm not really clear about in my consciousness, that are driving my behavior and not getting the results that I want, they've taken a while to kind of get put together. They didn't happen overnight. So I think someone who comes into it with an idea that going through a shadow work process is going to just change everything magically from one day to the next, they're not going to get the result they're looking for. It's a tool set. It's a tool set that can help, but I've got to recognize that it's a journey. And I may need to do it over time, and that I'm going to shift slowly but consistently from living a life where what's driving me is driving me to choices that I don't really want, to then showing up the way that I really do want to show up. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, good.
It's not going to be something that happens quickly.
I mean, there's aspects of it. There's aspects of it that can stick and shift and have a change. But by and large, it takes time to work with shadow.
Yeah.
So to come in with an expectation that I'm going to have a gradual shift is a healthy way to approach it, I think.
Right.
So when I don't do that, that can be failure.
Yeah.
I think coming in with the idea that, like, hey, you're a shadow work coach or a facilitator, go ahead and fix me.
Fix me.
Right. But I think that's the case anywhere.
Yeah.
Like if I go to a yoga studio and I'm like, hey, make my body really good without me doing the work, same thing. So I think that's more obvious. The more obvious one is I've got to come in with a desire, a willing spirit, looking for something to be different in my life. if I don't come in with an idea that there's something that I'd like to be different about how I'm showing up, about how I'm engaging the world, about how or what energy I bring given the difficult circumstances I might have, then I'm not going to get a good result. So I want to have an open, willing spirit. So if I don't have that, if I'm just coming in rigid and fixed and blaming others for what's happening in my life, shadow work's not going to really help me.
Yeah.
So there'll be a failure there.
Open-mindedness,
Willing spirit,
and not have a victim mindset, some amount of like
yeah,
responsibility or like agency.
agency is a great term for it. I think it's about recognizing that there's a way I want to show up, and I have some responsibility for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the change happens within them.
Exactly.
You're gonna be almost like a partner with them but it has to happen inside of them. It has to, you can't, we want a pill in our society, we want a pill to fix everything. And I've found that I've sought out transformational experiences thinking, oh, after this,
It's going to be okay.
I'm going to be,
Mm-hmm.
I will have sought and found
Everything I need to know.
everything I need to know. And maybe what you find out after doing a number of those, which I have, is that, it's not in the blink of an eye experience. It's really the having those experiences over and over, like the Joseph Campbell hero's journey, where you meet people out in the world that change you little by little. And that change happens inside, and it's gradual, and it's not like that.
Although there can be moments of a shift that have long-lasting implications in a positive way.
Yeah. Those transformational experiences are profound. Yeah. I've had them in a lot of contexts. The New Warrior Adventure Training is one of them. And the effects of it last to this day.
Right. Yep. And that's true for most people that do that training.
Yeah.
That's true for me. And I did that training 14 years ago, almost 15 years ago. And the experiences I had being facilitated with a shadow work process while I was being certified, training to be certified as a shadow work facilitator, also stick with me in their own ways. And some of them are conscious ways and some of them are unconscious ways. I used to bite my fingernails a lot when I was young, or starting when I was young, all the way through adulthood. And there was an anxiety and underlying energy in me that had me like, and I don't bite my fingernails anymore, right? But I don't think about it. It's not a conscious thing.
You didn't say, I want to stop biting my fingernails. The energy
I've said that before. I've had that idea.
You didn't do a process.
I didn't do a process to say I'm going to stop biting my fingernails. As I've done my work over time, that anxious energy that has been inside of my body's been released.
Yeah.
And one impact of that is I don't bite my fingernails.
When I think about this gradual change over time, I think of unraveling. Or I'm reminded of this show and the experience I have. I'll have this conversation with you, and this will be like a first wave for me.
Yep.
And then I'll edit it. And when I'm editing it, I'll be with you and I'll be with us, and I'll have new revelations. And that's almost like the subconscious unraveling that happens in the aftermath of a transformational experience.
Exactly.
There's a churning. There's it takes a while to understand. Like you could say something when a child is 15 that they don't get until they're 38.
Yep.
Yes. Their mind has to churn. Their subconscious has to churn on it for a while.
It reminds me of when the student is ready, the teacher appears, kind of a thing, right? But yeah, I'll continue to have awarenesses. I recently traveled to gather with the certified shadow work facilitators in North America about 3 weeks ago. And part of that process it's our recertification that we do. It's required every 2 years, but I like to go every year because it's a powerful experience and a very supportive experience. But each of us facilitates twice during this 4-day period. And is facilitated once. So each of us steps out on the carpet and says, all right, this is what I'd like to have. This is how I'd like to be, what I'd like to feel, the energy or characteristics I'd like to bring to my life right now that I'm having a little difficulty with. And then I'm facilitated to work through that. Well, I just had a really powerful experience around, this awareness of these whispers that still exist in my head that say things like, you're broken, there's something wrong with you. And those started at 5 years old because of whether they wanted to or not. My family members kind of helped with that. And I love my family. And, they were a product of their environment. Yet here I am 3 weeks from that, and I'm still, having awarenesses pop up like, oh yeah. And it's integrating still. Like one of the things I came away with was like an affirmation that I really was able to connect with is that I'm zesty. I have a zest for life because that's what I was looking for. Things had gotten a little stagnant for me.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm a big introvert. That zest is a quiet zest. I'm not the guy that's out in the middle of the room yelling and hooting and hollering. But there's a curiosity to that. And I noticed coming here today, I have this energy of, wow, this is cool. I'm curious to see how this goes.
Yeah.
Whereas there was a point in time, like when I was biting my fingernails, the energy that was present was that whisper or that yelling of, you're broken, there's something wrong with you, you better fucking do it right. Is it okay if I swear?
Yeah, you can swear.
Thank you. Because that's the energy that was present for me. You better do it right, Craig. So I'm total agreement with you about how those things continue to unfold and awarenesses continue to come.
Yeah.
And shadow work is like that.
I think, was it Albert Ellis, the relational...
Never heard of him.
Behavioral therapy. He's the precursor to cognitive behavioral therapy. He talked about self-limiting, self-defeating beliefs.
Ooh.
Which, I mean, he's not the only person that has discovered those or talked about them, but these self-limited beliefs, like I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, no one loves me, everybody has to be my friend. He had like a list of 16 or 18 of them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And we all have them.
Right. And the problem is they're not in the consciousness. I don't get up in the morning and say, I know I want to do this thing or be this way in my life. But I'm really clear that I've got this message going on, this belief in my head. It's not a conscious thing.
No.
It's a whisper. It's in the dark corners. It's in shadow.
And it doesn't say it directly. It comes out in doubt.
Or it comes out in a
fear.
constriction in my body.
Yes. A somatic type of communication.
Exactly right.
And it holds us back from maybe what our playful, creative, childlike self would like to experience.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think all of this discussion was around, how does Phil fail at shadow work? And that's the ways that I think if anybody could fail, that's it. I look at failing at shadow work is engaging with it and not getting the result that I'm looking for and perceiving that as a failure.
Well, that might be the first opportunity to... It's hard to effortlessly effort.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to do something without an end goal in mind.
Mm-hmm.
There's some balance or some tightrope we're walking of having a vision, having a North Star, but being open to uncertainty and where it might flow kind of around that directionality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it's not usually a straight line.
It's not a straight line.
And I would say, this is probably true for you, and it's true for me. When I have an idea about, wouldn't this be great in my life? And then, I think we're going to do it this way. And so I can get that result or that thing. And it doesn't go that way. However, if I'm open and I'm flexible and I'm curious, then I have much better opportunity to have a good experience getting to that.
Yeah.
And probably getting to that even.
Might be like the Rolling Stone says, you can't always get what you want,
But if
but
you try sometime, you get what you
you
need.
get what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And being open to different possibilities,
Yep.
open to different positive outcomes,
Right.
it
Yeah.
increases your kind of, I don't know, it increases the positive outcome zone or something. It's like you have much more room for success.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be this narrow pathway.
Which is easier said than done.
Easier said than done.
Right.
Because because there's a lot of information out there that, like, if you want to succeed at something, be narrow.
Yep.
Right?
Yes. Be a niche. Have a niche market.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have an expertise. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Fine tune that goal. So there's like almost this,
Mm-hmm.
it's the binary, right?
Yeah.
Of having a lot of focus, having a lot of niche or determination in one specific area versus having this, it's almost left brain, right brain.
Uh-huh. That makes sense to me.
Where one hand, the right hand is all fine motor skills, and the left is
the creative
mm-hmm. and awareness that's vast,
mm-hmm.
expanding,
expansive, yeah,
and constant.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one's really fine-tuned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sharp.
Yeah. Question 2.
Yes.
What do you think success is for shadow work?
Well, it's kind of the opposite of failure. So if I don't have a willing spirit, if I don't own that there's something in me that I'm looking to shift, that's a failure. So having a willing spirit to have change,
mm-hmm.
and being willing to own that this is about me, coming into it with an idea, a thought that there's something in me that I know is getting in my way, and I would like to work with that in a way to shift that, is a way to get success. In other words, just having a willing spirit to look at myself, to explore myself, is the first and most important way to ensure success with shadow work. And like I said, if it's the opposite of the failure, it's recognizing the long game of something like shadow work, that recognizing that I won't get the result I'm looking for overnight, that it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
And be willing to invest some energy, and be willing to know that when I try something and do something, that it's going to take longer. Like, for example, a perfect analogy for this is a tool that I share with my clients, and it's called the 20/200 rule. And you probably have an idea of this when I tell you, but it takes 20 times of doing something new just for it to start to feel comfortable. And it takes over 200 times of doing that new thing or habit for it to become a habit.
Hmm.
So if I start something on January 1st, that's a daily habit. 3 weeks into January is when it starts to feel comfortable, just starts to feel comfortable. And then it takes until late July of doing that new thing every day before it becomes a habit. Right? So if I take that analogy and I apply that to shadow work, it's to look at, it's going to take some time to have this shift. So if I go and go to a shadow work weekend, one experience where I'm being facilitated in a group environment to help me shift something in me, that whatever I discover there may not stick right away. So maybe I need to go to another one or have some follow-up. Or if I'm going to work with a coach like me, and have them work with me in the capacity of shadow work, to recognize, it's not a 1 or 2 session thing. I'm going to spread it out over time and have some consistency, because there I start to work with it and start to make it feel more comfortable to be the new way that I am.
Yeah.
Does that land?
It does land.
Okay, good.
The relationship with the work, the shadow work, leads to different choices that these folks are making in their life.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's where this habit creation thing comes in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Perfect example is I want to be more confident so that I can stand up for myself in my work environment.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of work with IT and finance professionals
Yeah.
from the background that I told you about. And so that's, introverts that are very smart, very technically smart, but they want to be more confident in showing up in a group environment, in leading meetings, or saying no to their boss, or negotiating with their boss instead of saying, okay, I'll get that done tonight at midnight because you think it's due tomorrow, and I'll sacrifice my family time for that, right? You know
Yeah.
exactly what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. So but the goal there is confidence to, I'll call it, bring my contester online.
Mm-hmm.
Contesting is a function of the warrior. It's pushing back.
Yeah.
So yeah, someone will come to me and say, I want to be able to speak up more when someone asks me to do something that I don't agree with, and someone in power in the organization that I'm in. So, when I work with them, it's about, let's start getting you to do that more often in situations where it's not so risky, right? So how do I get it done 20 times when I'm not dealing with the biggest one, but I can find other situations where I could bring some of that contester pushing back energy,
Yeah.
where it's not so scary and risky for me to do it, so that I'm building up to
You're building a muscle.
that's it. So I love the 20/200 rule.
I like that too.
Yeah, there was I've forgotten his name, but in the pathways training, there was a guy that taught me about, it was a Russian guy that did some study around people who changed their lifestyle and some of the factors that were involved in that. And this was one of those factors, having the realization that if I just declare on January 1st that I'm going to get in shape without a view of the long game, that it takes 20 times of doing it
Mm-hmm.
to feel comfortable, 200 for it to become a habit, I'm destined to be that person who quits after 2 weeks.
Because you haven't enrolled in the journey.
I haven't seen the big picture
Yeah.
of what's required.
You haven't said yes to what's actually required.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
the 200.
Yeah. And that I'm going to have resistance of going to the gym, or I'm going to have internal resistance to pushing back somewhere in my work environment, even if it's not the big risky one, even if it's not with my boss. I am going to have some internal resistance, because that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I've got something in shadow that says, if you speak up, you're not going to get a good result.
You're going to die. There's
Essentially,
there's some
worst case scenario.
There's some survival thing that's enforcing them to be little or to not speak up for themselves.
Yeah. And they put that in their shadow bag,
Yeah.
because when they were young, there was an experience where they may have spoken up. And the result, the pushback, was strong enough by something or some force bigger, usually a person.
Probably ostracization. We have a socialized mind. And
Absolutely.
It's always fearing
Parents, could be teachers.
Yep.
It could be bullying at school.
Yeah.
All that. Yeah. So,
I think of two books around this area. Atomic Habit. Are you familiar with that book?
I'm not.
And The Power of Habit.
Not familiar with
Two
that
books
either.
that focus on how do we build habits? How do we change? And it's almost this other technical side for what you're talking about, which is having an awareness of what you're embarking upon, like, and really buying in, really enrolling in the long game.
Yeah, maybe having a bit of a plan in place that's about the long game.
Yeah.
Which the 20/200 rule is just a part of that, right? There's other things to do. I can declare publicly that I'm going to make this change.
Yeah.
So there's some accountability I can put in place. You know, a lot of people think accountability is the only thing, but having accountability as a piece of that is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's just not the only thing.
You could probably scaffold a lot of things to help one realize a goal. And you probably need game at plan A, plan B, plan C. I think of like bank robbers. I don't know why I think of bank robbers. I could think about, I guess, military commanders, but they're going to have like plan A, plan B, plan C, because when plan A doesn't work,
You need to have a fallback.
we got to have a plan B and then a plan C. And think about it with my own physical journey. Like I thought, you know what? I want to lose some weight. I want to get strong. I'm just going to exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And then that wasn't really getting me the results I wanted. And I was like, well, I'm going to do exercise and yoga. I'm going to try to do this other thing. And then that really wasn't getting me the results. And it was like, well, I'm going to bundle in nutrition.
Yeah, diet.
And it's like constantly, but you're going towards something. And that is clear.
Yeah. Yeah, your comment about having plan B and plan C made me think of the Mike Tyson quote.
Oh, everybody, what is the quote?
Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Yeah. Everybody has a plan to get punched in the mouth.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Then you got to kind of show up.
Yeah, or have a plan B and a plan C.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, 'cause I think what he's speaking to is you probably don't plan on getting punched in the face,
Right.
right?
Right.
You go out there and say, I'm going to win this fight. I'm going to do all the punching in the facing. I'm going to block everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what he's talking about is accounting for failure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's another, an aspect of that. So back to the point, right? The point here is how do I succeed at shadow work, right? Which is seeing the long game, recognizing that shadow work is a tool and a piece of it, and it will help. It helps tremendously because it takes some of those things that go on in the quiet corners of my spirit, my mind, my soul, that tell me my critic is usually a big one, right? And it begins to shift those so that they're not only are they not so loud and powerful, but they can actually begin to shift to be more a positive force. If I begin to look at them that way, if I look at my really the basis of shadow work is identifying all the parts of myself, right? Which is kind of tied into the whole Gestalt thing that I think we talked about sometime earlier, roles and parts. It's about identifying the parts of myself that I don't accept, that I think are just hurting me, and working with them in a way that I recognize they're just trying to help me, and seeing if they can help me in a better way, a more effective way. Because when the part of me that shows up that says, you better not speak up to your boss,
Yeah.
right? That part's just trying to help me. It's making me afraid to speak up and speak my truth. As an example to my boss, it could be in a relationship, it could be with my parents or children, anywhere I don't speak up. That part that shows up that stops me from doing that is just trying to say, look, this isn't safe for you and I don't want you to get hurt.
Yeah.
Right? But it's taking away my power. I don't show up powerfully and therefore I don't get what I want. So it's about working with that part so that instead of maybe saying you're a loser, and if you speak up, it's going to be terrible. Maybe that part a subconscious part can start to say, you're fine. Just try it this way. And by the way, I'm just trying to keep you safe. How can you do that in a more safe way?
Yeah, I like that.
A lot of shadow work is about how do I make it safer? And some of that's working with the subconscious parts, and some of it's consciously, like when I'm afraid, and I'm a lot less afraid at this juncture of my life than I used to be. But one of my mentors, Cliff Barry, who created shadow work, said, I just find a way to make it safer. Maybe it's taking smaller steps. Maybe I need to remind myself. Maybe I need to say something out loud so that when I say that, it makes it safer for me. So that's a bit random, but I think it's tied back to success with shadow work.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's not expelling these parts of ourselves.
No, it's accepting them.
It's folding them in.
It's folding them in, and it's embracing them
and loving them.
Yes.
Acknowledging that you're here to help. You're a survival instinct in there. It's kind of the timbre, the tone of it isn't allowing me to realize my full potential.
Yeah. It's stopping me from having what I want, but it's not because it hates me. It's because that part loves me enough to have come online usually at an impressionable age.
Yeah, and then stay online forever.
One of the questions that a shadow work question is, like I might talk to a part of somebody. I might say, hey, Philip, so there's a part of you that, tells you that you're a loser because there's a risk that if you show up big, you might get rejected. Is that right? And I may ask to talk to that part of you and say, so when did you come online? When did you show up in Philip's life? And he's like, yeah, well, he was 5. And what was going on back then that caused you to show up and start telling him that he's a loser? Well, he wasn't doing things right, and his mother or father or siblings or schoolmates were telling him he was a loser if he did that. So I just kind of did that so he wouldn't put himself in that situation to feel like he did. Right in there, I can start to work with that part. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a way that we do shadow work, is working with parts and helping a person to have an awareness of, oh yeah, that part that I've been rejecting really isn't a bad part.
A story from my life came up that I think fits this. Can I share it?
I'd love to hear it.
If you look around this room, you'll see instruments everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see ukuleles, pianos,
yeah.
percussion
Some-
instruments,
Yeah.
a bass
Bongos
over there.
or something
There's some
over there.
bongos.
Yeah.
There's a cajon.
Yeah. A couple of guitars.
Yeah, of course. I love music.
Yeah.
I've always loved music. Before I got the degree in radio, television, and film, I studied music at North Texas,
Nice.
jazz studies. And a lot of my friends are musicians. And I did music production out in LA for a while before getting into software.
Mm.
Worked for some phenomenal composers. I love singing. I love playing music. Love it. I write songs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one of my best friends, a close friend of mine. His name is Charlie Chamberlain. He's a producer and a songwriter, and he's phenomenal and a really wonderful artist. Well, he got accepted to the Kerrville Folk Festival.
Mm-hmm.
New songwriter. It's like a competition. And
Gotcha.
some people win it and they get to come and perform, and it's like this whole thing. And he invited me to come out there and kind of navigate that experience with him.
That must have been really cool.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
I was basically hanging out with all these just amazing songwriters and spending that time with him. He lives in Nashville now, and I just don't get to spend as much time with him. So we were connecting a lot, and it was an amazing experience.
In that creative space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun and
Yeah.
playful and,
Yeah.
and it was wonderful. And the story that I'm brought to is this experience at the late at night. A big part of Kerrville Folk Festivals is these artists going around from campfire to campfire and singing
Wow.
and performing.
Mm.
And he took me with him. And because he was part of this kind of competition community, they got to go to some elite campfires, like ones that a lot of people don't get to go. And I got to be in those circles too,
Yeah.
because I was with him and I was with all of the artists. And, I sat down in front of a piano in this circle of people, and it went around and people shared songs. And I've got a handful of songs that I would love to play piano and sing.
Mm-hmm.
And when it got to me, I couldn't do it.
Mm.
I wanted to do it so bad.
Uh-huh.
And I have piano songs that I have rehearsed and I know how to play with emotion and powerfully and with, with spirit. But when it came to my turn,
Mm-hmm.
I passed.
Yeah.
And I've forever regretted that. And as it was coming around to me, I've had fear and I had all these shadows not allowing me to be a full expression of myself and just being playful and creative and being a member of that group at that time.
Yeah. And not worrying about the outcome.
And not worrying about the outcome.
Right.
For some reason, I thought, if you do it, you're going to screw it all up and everybody's going to hate you.
Yeah.
And you'll be, I don't know what I thought would happen, but it stopped me from expressing.
Yeah.
And the stakes were, relatively low, but in my mind, they were high. It was like, if these people hear my music and they think it's good, maybe I'll get a record deal, or maybe I'll come back next year and I'll get to be a performer.
Yeah.
There's a longing there.
Yeah.
my buddies in this place that I wish I was in.
Yeah. How long ago was that?
Oh man, probably 3 years ago, maybe.
Not that long.
It wasn't that long ago.
So I'm curious, like, do you believe that if you had that experience today, that you would make a different choice? Or do you have a sense that that shadow is still there and strong enough in that environment that might keep you from
It's a
doing
good
that?
question.
Yeah.
I think
Because you have a lot of awareness of yourself. I want to affirm that about you. As I talk to you, I see you as someone that has been on his journey and knows himself, and you do a lot to explore yourself and know what makes you tick, if you will.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, people have experiences where like, okay, that's shifted in me.
All of
Which is
this,
why
I
I'm
think when
asking.
all of this gets to a good place, those creative, like you're chewing your nails,
Yep.
it will float away and I'll express more
Yep.
openly and creatively. Those are longings that I still have. I
Mhm.
want to play in the world. I want to be musical. I want to do those things. And this almost feels like the foundation of those expressions.
Mhm.
Coming to terms with some of these shadows, coming to terms with, my physical fitness and my fragility as a human, that I'm going to die.
Mhm.
And that it's important how I spend this time on earth.
Yep.
And I'd like to think if I came back, I would be able to sing that song and play that song
Mhm.
and have fun, be that wild man
Mhm. Yeah.
that loves to express because
Yeah.
he's in there.
Yeah, it's such a safety piece to me. It's about believing that people say feel safe. I think that it's about believing that I'm safe just to do it, and it doesn't have to be right.
Yeah.
And most likely those people would have embraced you and loved you and thanked you for offering your creative self. But the shadow inside of you was saying, ain't going to do that.
This is scary.
Yeah.
There's this other part of safe space. It's this brave space.
Mhm.
Like this, his two things. I guess in your context, maybe we strip away the necessity for it to be brave. Because it's not as courageous an act when it's
Right.
just flowing from you.
Well, bravery is required when I have fear. And, right?
Yeah.
I've got to be brave because I'm afraid. And, how many of us have heard just be brave, right? But yeah, I think that working so that the fear isn't present,
Yeah.
or the part of me that's making me afraid, that one part of all my parts, because I've got many, many parts. That's just one that was shouting or whispering or whatever in your ear to the point that you said, I'll pass. It's about working with that so that that part is it's not shaming me. It's not making me afraid, and maybe even helping me to know how to make it safer or how to take a smaller step. Because you might have said, you could potentially, there was a way to say, I'm a little intimidated by this environment and I'm still going to do it. Like out loud, even say,
Yeah.
wow, you're all so powerful. I just want to acknowledge that it's intimidating for me. And I know I have something to give, and it won't, it may not be perfect, but I'm going to bring what I have. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like there's so many different ways. Like that might have, doing something like that might have softened the fear a little bit.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
In improv,
Giving it a voice.
Yeah, giving it a voice. In improv, we sometimes say the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
Because it's humanizing.
It's humanizing.
And it gives us a little bit of leeway.
It's also vulnerable.
It's vulnerable.
So it's scary to do that. But if I think about what I'm hearing you say is, I still have regret.
Oh, yeah.
From an experience 3 years ago when I had an opportunity and I didn't take it.
Right.
Like, to me, that's worse. That's sadder than whatever would have happened had you said, hey, I'm intimidated here, but I really want to do this.
Yeah.
I just want to say the quiet part out loud. I'm intimidated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was a a study or a question that was asked of folks that were in their end life. It was like, what are your regrets? And it was
Mhm.
the things they didn't do.
Yeah. Usually around connection with people.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right? Like a lot of it is, I wish I had told my kids I love them more, kind of stuff. Right?
Yeah.
So lots of ways to have success with shadow work.
Yeah. Question 3.
Yeah.
Is there a process? What is shadow work like from a nuts and bolts perspective? Like, how do you approach it? Is that a question that can be answered?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
I mean, uh, so from a nuts and bolts perspective, we kind of start with this high level model that you're familiar with, right? So shadow work came together with a combination of things. Number one was this idea of the human shadow. I
Mm-hmm.
told you about a little book on the human shadow by Robert Bly, which was the idea of the shadow. And then this idea of 4 archetypes that came from the book by Robert Moore and Doug Gillette called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And I know you're familiar with that. And so that was sort of a model that Cliff Barry, who created shadow work along with Mary Ellen Whalen back in the 90s, towards a little after the Mankind Project got off the ground. Cliff was involved in the Mankind Project and the New Warrior Training Adventure, and then kind of went off and created shadow work separate from the Mankind Project. And so with the idea of that we all have these archetypal energies in us, right? The energy of the king or sovereign, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. And so he broke it down into like, what are the qualities of each of those that we all have? And to begin to look at which of those might be inflated, which ones might be deflated, as I put things into the shadow bag as I go through life. Mm-hmm. Some of those get inflated and some get deflated. And then there was work done by a couple called Hal and Sidra Stone around voice dialogue. And it was about how to talk to people in a way that was therapeutic and how to work with people. Yeah. Hal and Sidra Stone.
Yeah.
And how to work with people and to talk and to work with them before some traumatic event and to shift the energy around a traumatic event. And so with this model of the 4 archetypes and this voice dialogue language, and there was another guy whose name I've forgotten who also did something similar. He was an Australian guy. They created a series of scripts, and they basically said, there's woundings in these 4 archetypes. The wounding in the sovereign is I'm not enough. So if I have this shaming message that I carry that I'm not enough, we hold that in the king or the sovereign. And I say sovereign because I work with men and women. It's not just men's work.
Yeah.
So, but the other energies are really applicable to both men and women: lover, warrior, and magician. Sovereign is that more generic. The lover energy of I don't love right. People take on a wounding message that the way that I love isn't right. The warrior wounding message is I don't exist apart from you. Mm. It's all about boundaries and balance and how do I have my sense of self. And the magician wounding message or the shaming message there is I'm bad or there's something wrong with me. But it's generally an idea of being bad. So they took he took those woundings and this idea of voice dialogue, and he created scripts that are questions, really, that help people to get clear about what's going on by bringing parts out. So in general, what we do is we ask some safety questions with people. Is there anything going on in your body right now that might keep you from doing a process with me today? In coaching, there's not so much of that because we don't do a lot of real physical stuff. But if we're in a group environment, we might check in on that. You probably heard that on the Mankind Project weekend, any safety things around physical. We ask them, is there anything about the space we're in that might keep you from being present? If we're in a group environment, we could ask, is there anybody here that might cause you to edit what you say or do? And then we would just ask people, what do you want to have happen here? Right? So what is it that you want to have happen here? And, the answer we're looking for is some kind of a positive, specific want about how they want to be, how they want to feel or show up in light of the circumstances that are in their life, right? I want to be more confident. I want to be more loving. I want to be, more disciplined in how I take care of myself. Anything around what they want to have happen for themselves to be able to have the experience they want. That's the big thing, is find out what they want. And then in general, once we do that, we kind of say, okay, great. So if I said to you, Philip, just be that way, you'd say to me, I would, except for what? So what's keeping you from doing that, right? And that's the beginning of exploring the shadow that's in play here, is to sort of ask people to kind of tell me more about why you can't be that way. What happens for you? And oftentimes it comes down to a part of themselves that shows up that says, don't do that. It's going to be bad. Or and there's some kind of a you shaming message that people have. And so we tease it out. We ask them to kind of characterize it. Well, if this space we're in represents your life, where would that part be? Is it when you want to be confident and that part shows up and says, hell no, don't be confident because you're a loser. Is that in front of you energetically, or is it a whisper over here or over here? How do you know that's happening? Where do you feel it in your body? How do you know that it's not okay for me to go talk to my boss about a raise? Like, I have a knot in my stomach, right? So we sort of begin to characterize that. And then depending on whether it's a group process or a coaching session, we like to call what we split it out. And we help say, okay, well, you got this part, and then there's you. We kind of split it out, externalize it.
Yeah.
And so you've seen a process on a new warrior training adventure weekend where some of that can happen, like pick somebody to play the energy of that message.
Oh, yeah.
So we kind of set it up and we try to get the messages out, and then the person's reaction to those messages, like, yeah, when I hear that, I think, oh yeah, you're right. Right? So then we pick somebody to play that part, and we step them back. We like to say putting them in the magician perspective, to detach from it and to see it from a distance. And then we have ways, kind of check in like, oh yeah, you weren't born with that, right? That's probably shadow stuff that got put in the bag along the way.
Yeah.
So when do you first remember having that experience in your life where this part of you started saying you're a loser? And usually there's an age. Oh yeah, it was 5, it was 10, it was, okay, what was going on? Okay. So who are these people? Oh, that's you and that's your father. Okay, great. And then from there, we say, well, in light of what you said you wanted, which is to be confident, to speak up to your boss about a raise, what do you want to have happen here in this scene so that you can have that? And then we have more specific processes that we do that I won't get into because it would be like describing a movie to you. Like, you really have to experience it.
They're all unique.
And they're always unique,
right?
but we have specific scripted processes.
Oh, you do?
We do.
Okay.
And we follow what's there to make a we may offer them a couple of choices. Well, you could do this or you could do that. And then we guide them through doing that. So that's more of the group facilitation.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm working with somebody one-on-one, I just worked with a guy last Saturday, and we got the parts out in the 4 archetypes and had capes on the floor with different colors to represent those parts. And I moved him. I had him step into this part, and I interviewed that part.
That's very Gestalt, isn't it?
It is very
the man in the
Gestalt.
chair, right?
Yeah, and about the guy that showed up here today,
Yeah.
who said, I wanted to have this or that. This guy wanted to have some excitement about life. And this part was encouraging him, and this part was hiding under a rock, and this part was critical, and this part was just trying to keep him safe. And so there's scripted questions that have been developed that really work, that help people to see what's happening from a different point of view, from a way that they've not been able to see it. It's taking that from shadow and putting it into the consciousness. In this space, this container, if you will, that has no real world consequences. In the case of a coaching session, there's nobody else there, so they can say or do what they want.
Right.
In the case of a group process, we do confidentiality up front.
Right.
And so they may be dealing with a message they got from their parents, but their parents aren't there, so it doesn't matter what they say or do, because they're working with what's going on inside of them. And ultimately, what we do is we help them find a way to get what they need and to bring that to themselves is probably the best way I can describe it.
Is this the guts work?
Well, so guts work is real warrior.
That's from,
is
that the
MKP.
carpet work where we...
But that's a real warrior function. Those are processes that are designed for a warrior, a new warrior training adventure weekend.
They sound similar to...
Yep. And Cliff Barry brought a lot of that to the Mankind Project.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Did.
Because it's this psychodrama, right?
It's psychodrama. Exactly right. And so in shadow work, we don't do very many, gauntlet runs or where we have to put safety on someone. And there's not a lot of yelling in shadow work.
Okay. Yeah, there's yelling in gut work.
Right. But because guts work is more warrior. It's like, get your warrior online and run through a wall.
That's right. Put up your shield. Yeah.
And get angry. And getting angry is sometimes appropriate. And on a new warrior training adventure, men learning to own and express their anger in a productive way is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? My experience has been with shadow work is that the more subtle, the more, like I said earlier, sublime, or using a scalpel, ultimately is usually around some kind of grief and shame, and working with that. And you don't see so much of that on a new warrior training adventure because it is a new warrior training adventure, right? And it's a short process. It's a 20-minute process. So shadow work is much more in depth. I worked with this guy the other day for 2.5 hours, and time flew as we were doing that. And on a group weekend, we might work with each participant for an hour to an hour and a half for their process. And there's usually two things that are happening in a shadow work process. Either I'm setting a boundary with some energy that's inside of me, or I'm creating connection with some part of me that I need to create connection with. It's cutting or connecting.
It's saying like, this voice isn't wanted here, or saying, how can we fold this voice in and change it?
Or bring blessing. Right? Because if I'm hearing you're a loser, you're broken, there's something wrong with you, you don't know what you're doing,
we just really want to turn down the volume of that. Yeah.
Well, we want to bring a part in that says, you're wonderful. This is part of my process that I went through recently at our gathering. Was this part over here was saying, you're a loser, or you're broken, there's something wrong with you, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're saying. And that's been in my ear since I was a kid. And I know where it came from, and I know who it was. And so the result, the solution, was to find the part somewhere that could tell me, that came from me, that you're wonderful the way you are. You're the opposite of broken. You're special. You're a big introvert. You're different than people in a lot of different ways. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And, things may not go the way that you want them to go every time you try something new, but you've got something in you to make it happen, and you've got something to bring to the world. I imagine as you're doing what you're doing, you have both of those sides coming up,
Yeah.
and could use that blessing piece that says, hey, Philip, you're doing a good job. But if it comes from me, all right, that guy said that about me. Probably not true. But when you're able to access that from a place of deep truth and bring that blessing to yourself, then that's where the shift occurs, because that's when you'll believe it.
You're with yourself all the time.
And that comes from you or your higher power or
Yeah.
some source.
Right.
And I had to find the source for zest for life and curiosity. And I started by identifying other people who I saw that had it. Cliff Barry was in my process. And I said, well, you have it. I see it in you all the time. You just always have this, like, I'm going for the next thing. And I was invited to step into that energy and bring it over to this person who was playing the 5-year-old version of me, and to say it so that it was really from a place of truth. And then at the end, I got switched and I got to hear everything I said back to me. And that's when it grounded in. So ultimately what we do, and I know I've talked fragments about the process here, but hopefully you get a sense for, there's a structure to it. And, you made a comment earlier about me and creativity, I think.
Yeah. Artistry. Yeah.
Artistry. And I said, I'm a technician.
Yeah, I remember that.
And there is an artistry, and the technician is knowing what tool to use.
Okay.
Right?
You've got a toolbox of
I got a toolbox over here, right? And the artistry is in, someone told me recently, what I really like about you, Craig, is you cut through the chafe. And so when I'm working with someone, I'm able to help cut through the stuff that's not relevant to get to what's really the truth and relevant. So I got that feedback, so I'll say maybe that's true. But the artistry is in being able to listen and understand and make sure I ask questions when it's not clear so that I can get clear. It's my ability to feed back to somebody what they're saying in a way that is their words. Because if you say something to me and I feed it back to you with my words, that's incongruent. And you're going to go, oh, wait a minute. I see that happen with not facilitators that are not very good at that. But when I say your words right back to you the way that you said them, two things happen. Number one is you go, yep, that's what I said. And then number two, you might say, now that I hear that back the way that I said it, it's not really that, it's this. And that sharpens the process. That sharpens the truth of it. And that's a part of my artistry, if I have artistry, is my ability that I've developed as well as I've developed it, to listen and feedback and hone in and cut out what's not necessary to get really sharp and focused, because then, and only then, I can say, okay, well, if that's true, if I got you right and you got yourself right, yep, that's what I'm dealing with. Then I can say, well, here's a choice and here's a choice out of my toolbox, the shadow work process, that you can then say, all right, well, that seems like what I want to try here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Good. Every once in a while, I say something that makes sense. Someone said to me once, every now and then a blind squirrel finds a nut.
Well,
and
a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah. And that's my self-deprecating humor. But I will own that I've gotten enough feedback, without hopefully coming across as arrogant, that I have developed some skill. And some of that skill I developed as a software services consultant.
Yeah, I imagine.
Because I would get in front of groups of people and have to figure out, with all this information coming at me, how to whittle it down, how to cut out the chafe, to get to, well, we're going to design this model for you. I used to design multi-dimensional financial reporting models, hierarchical structures across multiple dimensions. It's great skill development for being a shadow work facilitator and coach. And organizational consultant.
For all of our younger listeners, separating the wheat from the chaff
Thank
or
you.
chafe
Chafe.
is an old school saying, I think, from the wheat is the valuable part, and the chafe or chaffer is.
Is it chafe?
I don't know.
Okay.
Chaff. I'm going to go with chaff.
Okay, great.
But separate the wheat from the chaff is you get the valuable part. The wheat is the value, is the most important thing. And this other thing has to be separated, almost like to go along with artist thought, a sculpture. The wheat is the sculpture of David. All of the rock that's on the ground is the chaff.
Yeah. And that was what happened when they harvested wheat,
Mm-hmm.
and they, created machines to do that ultimately, but was to cut away the stuff that wasn't the valuable wheat, so they had the wheat left. So
And
thank you for clarifying that.
yeah, well, just some of these young kids might not know what that saying is, and I'm reminded of this saying, at least with Buddhism, I think is where I've got exposed to it, is that enlightenment was a subtractive process.
Mm-hmm.
The things that you take away from yourself as opposed to things that you gain.
Yeah. And that makes sense practically if you think about like the movie Castaway, right? Where he's Tom Hanks, and plane crashes, he ends up on the island, and worldly possessions go away, and he was enlightened in that experience. Ultimately, he learned to survive by himself without anything, and then his perspective of the world, cut away all the what's the term they use? Whatever it is, all the stuff we have in life.
Yeah. I think my favorite enlightenment movie is Groundhog Day.
Oh yeah. It's a great one.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
He lived the same day over and over again. He had to figure out how to keep trying different things, good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah. And at first to manipulate.
Yeah.
But then he got bored with the manipulation.
Yeah.
Because he got what he wanted, but it wasn't really what he wanted.
Yeah.
I love that.
I love those movies. Yeah. Question 4.
Man, we're on question 4. We're moving through this.
We're moving through it.
How's our time?
We're almost at 2 hours.
All right.
So we'll wrap these up pretty quick.
Okay.
But to be human is to suffer. It's the first noble truth. Are you into Buddhism at all?
Not really.
That's okay. You don't have to be for the purposes of this question.
Yeah, thank you.
But to be human is to suffer is the first noble truth. And I wonder if we ever free ourselves from shadow. Like once we navigate one and kind of put it in front of us, pull it out of the bag, there's other ones in there. It seems like this is a process that will follow us our entire life. Is that true?
I would agree with that. I'm not sure I'm the right person to say is that true or not true.
Yeah.
But I can tell you my opinion. And my opinion is that there's always going to be something that I'm working on. And I don't believe that I'm going to get to it before I die where everything is perfect. And part of that is I'm going to have life experiences that show up that challenge me, that knock me off of that center, like sickness and death, for example, right? And so anytime somebody dies, that has me questioning, and the way I react to that may not be like who has somebody in their family that dies and then just deals with that perfectly, right? Or doesn't hide out, or doesn't check out, or doesn't, because emotions come up that are so strong. So I'm a firm believer that it's a lifelong journey. And from what I've seen, I just gathered with shadow work facilitators, some of them are in their 70s, and they're dealing with their shadows around aging and death and physical, body not working the way that it used to. And I'm dealing with some of that at 62. I don't run much anymore. I used to run. I was an ice hockey goalie for a while.
Okay.
Growing up in Boston. And, I haven't played ice hockey in a couple of years because my body just doesn't feel like I can anymore. And so, yeah, I think I'm going to have periods of time. I'm going to have seasons of
Yeah.
calm and peace, and everything's in flow. But that's never going to be, I'm never, even if I'm always up here, I'm still flatlining.
Yeah.
Life is this.
Right.
And so I also believe that the great joy in life comes out of the great struggle in life.
Yeah.
So I don't see a situation. I think what you shared, the quote that you shared, is, for me, it's very true. And so, yeah, it's great that this is working for me now, or that, yeah, I'm not biting my fingernails anymore. It's great. But we could sit and talk about the things that I still want to change in my life and work on about me,
Yeah.
So I do think that that there's not a Shangri-La or a utopia around a no shadow, and it took so many years for them to get developed until I even started looking at them. In my case, I was 38 when I started looking inside. I didn't look inside before that. I didn't have a sense. And I tried to manage everything from my quite smart brain, but it didn't work very well. I was divorced, all that stuff. So I think recognizing that, I think there's seasons, there's cycles of growth.
Yeah.
And so I have a struggle. When I'm in struggle is usually when I reach out to get help.
Yeah.
Then I get some help and I figure some things out. And then I integrate that new learning back into my life. And this also kind of follows the hero's journey cycle as well, right? Something changes, and then I go into the deepest, darkest part of my own forest to slay my dragons. I learn something about that, about myself in that experience. And then I bring that back to the community. And at that time, I'm kind of maybe on that plateau for a while, but then something else will come up. But it's not usually, there's sometimes it's the same things, but sometimes it's something different. Did you ever hear Portia Nelson life autobiography in 5 short chapters?
Yeah. You come up to a street. Tell us this.
Well, I can't quote it. I walk down the street. There's a hole in the street. It's chapter 1. There's a hole in the street. I fall in the hole. I don't know how I got here. Eventually, I get myself out.
Yeah.
Chapter 2, I walk down the street. There's a hole in the street. I see the hole. I know there's a hole in the street. And I fall into it. Eventually, I get myself out. Chapter 3, I walk down the street and, I fall into the hole again. But this time I realize it's like, oh, I got myself in here. This is my deal. I did something to get into this hole. And I eventually get out. And I continue walking. Chapter 4, I walk down the street and I see the hole and I walk around the hole and I don't fall in the hole. And then, of course, there's chapter 5. I walk down a different street.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I've quoted that one before.
I think I might have gotten it right or close to right.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So, but that can happen on one topic, and then the next topic or the next area of my life where there's a different shadow, I walk down the street and fall into the hole and don't know how I get there.
Yeah.
I still fall into holes at 62.
And this failure is part of life. It's part of learning.
I think so.
And so we probably have a lot of different streets we're in some chapter of that book with.
Relationships, money, health, physical, all those big areas that, people are focused on. Community, relationship, all that, like money. How many times do you think I got my money sorted out and then it's like, crap, I'm in that spot again. And some people don't have that, but I don't know. My son's a financial planner and I'm sure he's got times, and he's really good, like with his money. And I'm sure he has times where he's like, crap, how did that happen again to me? So I do think that it's just a lifelong exploration.
Yeah.
Of shadow.
Yeah, it sounds like that sounds true to me. 5th and final question. I don't really have one in mind. Part of me wants to know if you still can muster up a good Boston accent.
Oh, sure, hon. Yeah.
Park the car.
Yeah, it's more like I seen the kid on the corner selling firecrackers down there by the Dunkin' Donuts. What's so funny, and I'm not sure if my siblings and family will see this, but all of my siblings have Boston accents, and I left in 1990. Before that, I worked in fine dining, so I was around people that didn't talk with such a Boston accent so much. And I think as a teenager, I learned a little bit, but it doesn't take long. I was back in October to visit my family, and my accent comes back.
You put it on like clothes.
Yeah, it comes back, but I do hear them very differently. Like I make fun of my siblings.
Yeah.
In the way that, my oldest brother's a retired mechanic, and I love my family, and, he says car. How's your car? So it comes.
Yeah, I was born in Mississippi.
Okay.
Deep South.
I bet you got it.
Oh my goodness. And when I go back, I can,
oh, y'all.
I can get it. It takes a minute, but I can get those accents back. And there's something very comforting about when I hear a human being that has that accent. It's like a nourishing Thanksgiving meal.
Yep.
It's
old home.
It feels
like an
good.
old shoe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I meet, I can pick out Boston accents from people around here. Like if somebody, and I'll hear somebody talking and I'll say, so whereabouts in Boston are you from? And 9 times out of 10, they're from Boston somewhere.
I was ashamed of it.
Oh,
I wanted
really?
to lose that. I didn't want to have that accent.
I think that was the case for me as a young one.
I chose to, I think there's probably a shadow in me around those people being ignorant or
rednecks,
which isn't true. I mean, I imagine there's a lot of intelligence, wisdom, but for some reason, I really didn't want to be a part of that culture.
Yeah, I moved away at 28 or 27 or something like that. But I don't think it was because I was, I moved for work. But I think there was a part in there about wanting to get to a different place.
Yeah. Real fifth question. That was the joke fifth question.
Oh, great.
Oh, we gotta think of, is there a question that I haven't asked that you think it'd be good to be asked about shadow work?
Not really.
What kind of question would you ask your mentor about shadow work?
You got me on the spot for that. Well, my mentor, created shadow work, so
you got the big cheese. Yeah.
Yeah, like what's the biggest result from engaging in or being coached or having a shadow work experience generally might be a question.
What's the biggest result? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that it's about shame lifting. Ultimately, as a human being, I've carried these shaming messages that I got at, significant points. It's like there's a book by Peter Levine called Waking the Tiger.
Yeah, somatic experiencing. Yeah.
About trauma.
Yep.
And one of the things that he says in that book is that, if trauma is different for different people. Something that could be traumatic for one person wouldn't be for another person. Right. So if you took a 6-month-old baby, and of course we would never do this, and put him in a walk-in refrigerator for 15 minutes and left him there in a restaurant, as an example of a walk-in, that could have a certain trauma for that 6-month-old baby. If I put you in there for 15 minutes, that wouldn't be traumatic for you as an adult.
Right.
And so my point about that is that, things happen that are traumatic, and generally what they do is they create shaming messages, and those shaming messages are what go into shadow. And they're usually something about what I'm not or what's wrong with me, or usually, like you said earlier, it's about something that's not right about myself. And shadow work is at its core about lifting shame off of people. And when I help somebody lift shame off themselves, they're able to see themselves both consciously and hopefully even subconsciously as the positive parts, as the non-shaming place. Like I'm really enough.
Mm.
I love the way I love is wonderful. And I do exist apart from you. And no, I'm not bad. I'm really good. So I think at the core, that's what shadow work does for people, is it helps to lift shame.
And once shame is lifted,
I start to live more fully, more so like that one that was born, that came into the world with a 360-degree view. I don't censor myself. I don't stop myself. I begin to have more balance, and I begin to show up more fully, more confident about who I am, more relaxed. These are all the things that people want to have.
yeah,
With more energy, with more excitement about life. You know, you ever hear the Louis C.K. bit about everything's wonderful and nobody's happy?
I think I have.
Talking about being on an airplane, and they just
we're
introduced we're flying in a chair.
They don't have peanuts, right?
That was Wi-Fi.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
And then the Wi-Fi went out. It was like the first time they ever had it, and the Wi-Fi went out, and the person was like, "This is crap. I can't believe." It's like,
he's like, we're flying.
You're flying in a chair
in the air. Yeah,
contributing waste to space.
Yeah.
But it's about that kind of excitement. Like, you should be really excited that you're flying in a chair, and instead you're upset about something going on around you. And that's the kind of excitement that's the kind of excitement that I want to continue to access in my way and bring that to the world, which is like, this is freaking awesome. And, death is something that reminds me of that, It sharpens my sword of discernment, recognizing that I'm not going to be here forever.
Yeah.
So how can I make what's really important? And so when I take the shame off myself, I'm able to show up more fully. I'm able to be excited about life. I'm able to love with more compassion. And shadow work at its core helps with that.
And one tool is that death meditation, that inviting your own near-death experience.
It's not a shadow work tool per se, but it's a great tool.
Yeah.
I actually learned that for the first time at a training called the Inner King training that Cliff Barry, who created shadow work, helped create with Bill Kauth and Tom Daly and Dimitri Bilger back in the early 90s. And they do a process there about keeping the angel of death in front of me as a way to keep what's really important.
That makes sense.
You notice what happens. 9/11 happened, and everybody was really nice to each other for about 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Those of you that don't remember 9/11, it was back in 2001 when the terrorists crashed into the buildings, and a bunch of people died.
Yeah,
and people were afraid. And for a real short time, people were like, "I love you, brother, sister. How can I help you?" And now it didn't take long to get back into, I'm cutting you off on the road and giving you the finger.
Yeah, a less kind of exciting version of that is when I was a kid. I remember when I lived on this cul-de-sac in Houston, Texas, and when all the power would go out in all the houses, people would start to walk out their front door and then talk to their neighbors.
How can I help you?
How can I help?
Do you need anything?
Yeah.
We've got a generator, and so we've got some refrigerant, all that kind of stuff.
That stuff would start to happen, and there'd be this community form where there wasn't before. And that's the beautiful thing I think we should have all the time.
So when I do my shadow work, when I personally put myself in a position, and the thing about shadow work, it's hard to do it by myself because I can't see past the shadow. So it's really lends itself to being supported by somebody that knows how to guide.
Yeah.
And when I do that, I get back in touch with how wonderful I am in a humble way, in a good way. that I'm a wonderful human being. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, right? And I see others with more compassion when I do my shadow work
Yeah.
because I see myself with more compassion.
Yeah. Is Cliff Barry still alive?
Yep, I just saw him 3 weeks ago.
How old is he?
Cliff is 76 years old.
Wow.
You can always find out more information about shadow work at www.shadowwork.com.
Yeah, y'all go check it out.
Yes, for sure.
And it's an amazing thing to have the founder still alive and supporting the practice.
Yeah, I consider myself very, very fortunate to consider Cliff Barry a friend.
He's in Dallas?
He's in Boulder, Colorado.
Oh, he's in Boulder.
Mhm.
We'll have to see about getting him on the show. That'd be awesome. Does he talk to folks like this?
I'm sure he would.
Man,
Yeah, he's
awesome.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Goodness.
I'd be happy to make that connection.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Mhm.
That's Phil Phails' 5 questions. What were you saying?
I was just going to say, traveling is not as easy for him.
We'd have to go to Boulder.
If you go to Boulder, I'll go out there with you.
Heck yeah, we can both interview him.
Mhm.
That'd be dope. 5 questions.
Yeah,
We did it.
nailed it.
We nailed it.
Hopefully you all found some value in those discussions.
Yeah, there was this Buddhist speaker. His name was, what was his name? Oren J. Sofer. He was in nonviolent communication. And his work was at the middle of nonviolent communication, which is Marshall Rosenberg's work.
Mhm.
You might be
I'm familiar with NVC. Yeah.
Love it. And mindfulness,
Mhm.
what's like a John Kabat-Zinn thing,
Mhm.
and somatic experiencing,
Yeah.
which is the Peter Levine,
Yeah.
the Basil Vanderkopf stuff.
Yeah.
And he would say,
Moving the energy out of the body.
Mhm.
Yeah.
he would say,
The issues are in the tissues.
Oh, yeah. He would say at the end of his speech, he would say, I've talked a lot about some things. I'm paraphrasing. If any of this was helpful for you, take that with you. If
Yeah.
any of it wasn't, leave it on the floor.
Yeah.
You know.
My experience is this stuff that we've talked about today, that when I talk about it with people, whether it's in a more formal shadow work environment or just talking to people and having these discussions, it is thought-provoking. It is emotion-provoking. I heard you say a couple of times there, like, oh yeah, that made me think of this experience or that experience. And so that's my goal in this, is to help people, help to churn something in them for good.
Yeah.
So that they become aware and maybe helps to shift some energy.
Yeah. And if any of the viewers out there, if a story came up for you, share it in the comments, reach out, let us know what kind of shadows you have, if you feel comfortable sharing that sort of thing, and what stories are attached to them. I think engagement is something that is exciting for me to hear other folks' journey. I'm sure it would be for you as well.
That's why I do the work. I mean, there's some aspect of it that's like watching movies.
Yeah.
Because it stirs in me. And when I help somebody shift something or heal something or change something, your work is my work.
Yeah, your work is my work.
I can't tell people about something and to help shift their perspective without reminding myself. And oftentimes, like you and I talked earlier about our experiences and such a parallel from the restaurant business to technology to, this kind of a journey to the inside. And that's what I love about it, is it's a way of connecting and helping myself. And anybody that does this kind of work that says, I'm not doing it for myself, is probably not being honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do it because it helps me.
Yeah.